Pusser was only 26 when his name was etched in history. The youngest man to wear a sheriff's badge in the great state of Tennessee. His name was written year after year, a living legend that lawbreakers fear. To wipe out crime, he was a cinch. He stood tall and never budged an inch. He walked tall all over McNairy County, and on his head they placed a bounty. Never once did he think twice. To do his job, he paid one terrible price.
Buford Hayes Pusser was a national folk hero who became a living legend during his 6-year reign as sheriff of McNairy County, Tennessee. The 6'6", 250-pound Pusser clawed his way to national recognition in the mid-60s by waging a tireless war against the thugs and prostitutes who nested in the dives along the Tennessee-Mississippi state line. The battles bore high price tags. He was shot 8 times and stabbed 7. He was also forced to watch his wife die in a hail of bullets as she rode with him on an isolated McNairy County road. W.R. Morris, author of Pusser's authorized biography, The 12th of August, and a new book entitled Buford, knew the legendary sheriff as well or better than any other person.
In spite of the massive amount of publicity that surrounded Buford Pusser and his legend, few persons actually knew the real man. He was a soft-spoken, shy individual whose easygoing personality betrayed his marble hard image. He made many mistakes, but the good he did definitely outweighed the bad. Pusser sometimes straddled the line of taking the law into his own hands. When he felt it was necessary, he used brute force. His tactics were effective. Buford Pusser was a rural Southern sheriff whose honest law enforcement policies left a lasting impression on our whole nation.
The story of Buford Pusser began near Finger, Tennessee on December the 12th, 1937. It was in this house, in a farm community, with a name as unlikely as that of its most famous son, that Pusser was born. Buford was the youngest of 3 children, born to Carl and Helen Pusser. The Pussers labored on their small farm during the Depression years to rear their offspring, John, Gail, and Buford. Buford was an extremely shy child who clung to his mother's apron strings. Helen Pusser had to force her son to go to school.
He was just afraid to go anywhere, afraid to get lost, and he wouldn't go off on school trips or nothing. He stayed home and play all day. Said he felt it in his bones he must stay at home. The school was going to Nancy's Trace one time from Leakwood, and he wouldn't go. He was afraid to get lost. I remember one time, one of our neighbors died over there, and I went over there with him. He was a little fella, and we went on a truck to the funeral. It's way on down the other side of Milledgeville, way out there somewhere. And he was down there, and he stood right with the man that drove the truck while I was filling up the grave. And so Buford laughed about that one time. We went by that place where that cemetery is. He said he remembered it standing there afraid that man would go off and leave us. We wouldn't get back home.
In 1956, Pusser graduated from the Adamsville High School, where he had excelled in basketball and football. After high school, Buford Pusser decided to join the United States Marine Corps and make a career of it. Less than 4 months later, Pusser's dreams of a military future was shattered when the Marines handed him a medical discharge because of his frequent bouts with asthma. He reluctantly returned to Adamsville. Back home, brooding over his failure to impress the Marines, Pusser decided that a little state line entertainment might soothe his bruised ego. The Plantation Club, owned by W.O. HATHCOCK, sat just inside the Mississippi border. Inside the club, Pusser decided to try his hand at dice. His luck was good. The club owner, angry at Pusser's winning streak, gave the signal for his henchmen to throw Pusser out the back door. The thugs brutally beat Pusser. robbed him of all his money, and shoved him outside into a slow-falling rain. As Buford Pusser lay sprawled, half-conscious, face down in the gravel and rain, he could only think of someday getting even with this ruthless pack of thugs. They had gotten away with robbing, beating, and killing people long enough, he thought. For too many years they had done as they pleased without any interference from the law. Pusser drove himself to a medical clinic in Selmer, where it took 192 stitches to close the lacerations in his head and face. That was the day Buford Pusser declared war on the state line mob. That was the day he made a vow to wipe out the criminal element that thrived on corruption along the Tennessee-Mississippi border. Pusser worked briefly at the Shackelford Funeral Home in Selmer before obtaining employment in August 1957 with the Union Bag Company in Chicago. While in Chicago, he met a petite blonde named Pauline Vance. She was a divorcee with 2 small children, and on December 5, 1959, Buford married her.
That's good.
Marriage eased the loneliness in Buford Pusser's life, but it did not erase the bitterness that had been deeply etched in his mind on that cold, rainy night at the state line. Pusser decided to take the law into his own hands. On December the 13th, 1959, he returned to the Plantation Club and assaulted the owner, W.O. HATHCOCK. He also took back the money that had been stolen from him during the dice game. After the confrontation, HATHCOCK signed warrants against Pusser, charging him with assault to commit murder and armed robbery. An Alcorn County jury in Corinth, Mississippi, found Buford Pusser innocent of the charges. The verdict was a signal to Pusser that honest citizens were fed up with the state line criminals. Early in 1962, Buford Pusser made the decision to move his family from Chicago to his hometown of Adamsville in McNairy County. In addition to his 2 stepchildren, Diane and Mike Vance, Buford now had a daughter of his own. Dawana Atoya Pusser had been born on January the 9th, 1961 in Chicago's Ravenswood Hospital. Employment opportunities in McNairy County were almost non-existent. To put bread on the table, Pusser wrestled professionally in several West Tennessee towns. Midway through 1962, Carl Pusser, Buford's father, resigned as Adamsville's chief of police because of his failing health. The city alderman gave Buford Pusser his first law enforcement job when they named him the new chief. In September 1962, Pusser won his first elected office when he defeated veteran politician Tommy Morris for the constable post in the 3rd Civil District. Victory at the polls boosted the confidence he needed to tackle the task he had secretly vowed to undertake. Still thirsty for revenge because of his own unfortunate tangles with the hoodlums, Pusser began mapping plans to clean out the criminal element along the state line strip. He realized that the only way to accomplish that goal was to become sheriff of McNairy County. Buford Pusser, a Republican, urged the citizens to pin the sheriff's badge on him, and in return he promised to rid the county of the corruption and violence that now had a stronghold on the state line. As the pace of his campaign quickened, Pusser's popularity increased. The state line operators began to focus more and more attention on the McNairy County Sheriff's race. The campaign went smoothly until 2 days before the election. Incumbent Sheriff James Dickey was found dead in his wrecked car near the state line. Many people believed that the hoodlums, confident of a Pusser victory and afraid that Dickey's knowledge of their illegal activities might be used against them, had arranged the so-called accident. However, no evidence of foul play was ever uncovered. On September the 1st, 1964, Buford Pusser was sworn in as the sheriff of McNairy County. At age 26, he became the youngest sheriff in Tennessee history.
Sheriff Pusser, when you first ran for office, did you realize the responsibility that you were taking on here in McNairy County?
I did. Of course, I'd been law enforcement previous for 3 years as chief of police in Adamsville, Tennessee, and Some of the things that are going on in the county made me want to run for office of sheriff.
Learn the facts about the real Buford Pusser in the new book Buford by W.R. Morris. Buford is a breathtaking account that unlocks many of Pusser's secrets. Learn whom he named as his wife's killers, details of his fatal car crash, and much more. Also, many photographs. Order your hardback copy today. Send $14.95 plus $2 for handling to Poplar Books, Shiloh, Tennessee, 38376. While Buford Pusser had an optimistic attitude at the beginning of his career as sheriff, he quickly learned that the job was destined to be much tougher than he had anticipated. The Shamrock Motel, operated by Louise HATHCOCK, and the White Iris, owned by an ex-convict named Carl Douglas Towhead White, were two of the major breeding places for crime and corruption in McNairy County. Prostitution, bootleg whiskey, gambling, robberies, and murders were as regular as clockwork. Crooked law enforcement officers lined their pockets with greenbacks and engaged in illegal activities. Another thorn in Buford Pusser's side was the far-flung moonshining business. White whiskey brewing in the secluded West Tennessee woods was almost as common as the cotton growing in the open fields.
Fire!
Yeah.
Fire!
Buford, how serious was the bootlegging problem when you was first elected?
When I first came in office, I was catching at least one still a week and sometimes two a week with people at it. And still is in operation, and now maybe we catch one a month or something like that. And of course, it's just not been near as much of it made as it was before.
Even though Buford Pusser spent most of his waking hours combating crime, he always found time to enjoy the country and bluegrass music that he loved by mixing pleasure with his law enforcement duties.
He would come around and listen to the music and make sure things were going off right. And here's one of the numbers that he seemed to enjoy. It was a waltz number, Over the Wave Waltz.
You know, sometime later, Buford commented on that very first song, right, just like he comes straight forward and says. He commented like this.
Well, of course, when Eddie Barn came away and we talked about it, I didn't think too much of it then. I figured maybe it was kind of a gimmick, you know, whether somebody wanted to make some money off of it or something like that. But then after I thought it over, then and it's very seldom that some music entertainer wants to do something for law enforcement. They usually always want to put law enforcement down. Most of them are some hopheads, pill takers and stuff like that resent law enforcement work. And since the nation was trying to fight crime, so I thought it might be good that did something for law enforcement instead of trying to put it down.
When Pusser first took office, he decided he didn't need to wear a uniform or carry a pistol. That decision sometimes created problems.
One thing about him that seemed like I thought he should do was wear his badge where people would know who he was. Most time he didn't have on no badge, and a lot of strangers didn't know who he was. And never did have a gun on till right on the last. Maybe the last year or so he wore a gun. Yeah, he'd come in just a pair of plain dress pants on, and anybody sitting there didn't know him, they think he's just another customer come in. Yes, I believe sometimes why he did have some trouble is because people just really didn't know he was the sheriff of the county when he walked in. Yes, usually if there's any trouble before it started, he'd tell me he was the sheriff of the county. But once or twice, some of them didn't pay no attention to that, and that's when they, especially one occasion I know of it, 5 or 6 of them jumped him, and he broke one of them's leg and took about 3 of them to jail. They was cutting up, and he went back there and asked them to quieten down. Of course, they didn't know who he was at the time, but they found out later who he was. I knew Buford Pusser ever since he took office in '64. He made my place nearly every night, or most every night. He was a good man. What he told you, you could depend on. If all the ones ever I saw him arresting here, he always give them the benefit of the doubt. If he asked them to go home, he meant for them to go home, or at least get out of his territory. And if they didn't, if they come back, he'd take them to jail. I remember a time or two when he would tell people to get out of his territory, and he'd double back maybe in 30 minutes or an hour, and it'd still be here, and he'd just load them up and take them to jail. If he told you he was going to jail, you was going to jail.
After being shot and stabbed several times, Pusser armed himself with a .41 caliber Magnum.
Well, you say that when you were first elected, you know, that you wouldn't carry a gun, but now that you do, I guess maybe that you probably had some second thoughts on this line, didn't you?
I've been in 2 or 3 situations where I needed it and I didn't have it, and that's the reason I continue to carry it now, and I'll always go with it now.
Buford Pusser's second thoughts about carrying a gun saved his life on February the 1st, 1966. On that date, Louise HATHCOCK attempted to murder Pusser with a .38 caliber pistol when he went to the Shamrock Motel to arrest her on robbery charges. After Ms. HATHCOCK's weapon misfired, Pusser unholstered his Magnum revolver and shot her to death. Louise HATHCOCK thus became the first person Buford Pusser was forced to kill. She had been drinking heavily that morning. A glass nearly full of whiskey was still clutched in her hand when the shooting occurred.
Yeah, when I first went into, of course, office, when I was running the state line, they called me down, which is Louise HATHCOCK, and wanted to give me some money on my campaign, and I told her I had about $600, didn't need any. I thought that's all it'd take to make the race on, of course. And she just kind of laughed. She didn't think I had a chance, and of course, being real young running, and of course, nobody knew me, of course. So I guess they wanted some security on that anyway, you know, thought maybe a chance I might be elected. And so, and after elected, she sent a word for me to come down by one of her henchmen, And I went down and she said, well, she said, I want to start off giving you $300 a month, she says here. And I just laughed at her. Of course, this went on a month or two, and I hit her till they pretty good licks on liquor and stuff, and she called and wanted to come down again. I went down and talked to her, and she wanted to give me $500 this time. And of course, then we staged a big raid and then confiscated our Cadillac car and a 62 truck with a 62 Ford truck with 68 cases of liquor on it stuff, and she raised it on up to $1,000 a month then. So I just laughed at her, and of course that's when we was really getting rough with her then, and that's went along after that until of course I had to take her life then whenever she fired on me then.
Well, I'd compare her with Al Capone. She's about that type of person, that caliber person.
Was she very dangerous?
I believe she was, yeah. I think she'd kill you. Sure.
Okay. And so do you believe that Buford Pusser killed her in self-defense that morning?
Yes, I know he did. Sure did. I was there, and I know he had to kill her. He was either killed or be killed.
But I do know that she run a joint that's not recognized as a place to care the family for many years. State line, for years and years when I was just a little boy. Her and Jack had the place, and they've been tried a number of times for theft, for murder, for assault, you name it. They've been tried for it. And certainly, when Buford went down there to arrest her, I believe it was on a complaint of a stolen purse. A lady was missing a purse and spent the night in a motel. When Buford went down, it was reported, he went down to check it, of course. So we went in the room to talk to Louise, and she had told him to come on in her room, and he went to talk to her about it, pulled out a gun, and thank goodness the gun misfired, according to the reports. If it hadn't, she would have shot Buford. Another case, simple self-defense, knowing the woman would kill him. And yes, I've known him a long time, and I don't think Buford went to kill her at all. He just went to ask her some questions.
The 12th of August, 1967, was a date Buford Pusser carried with him to his grave. During the pre-dawn hours of that horrible August morning, Pusser's wife, Pauline, was murdered, and he was gravely injured by high-powered rifle bullets as they rode in the sheriff's car on an isolated road near the Tennessee-Mississippi state line.
Slowed down for this bridge that had been, well, it was about tore out at the time. It was real rough. And I slowed down real slow for that. And it was just beginning to break day. And first thing I knew, there was some car lights popped on. Just come speeding up the side of me. And the lights came on about the time that I noticed the car being there. And of course, then there was a burst of fire. Of course, the glass flew, and my wife kind of screamed. And of course, the only thing I knew was just gun it. I mean, it just took me by so surprise, you know. For 2 or 3 minutes, and the car sped on and off before I could get my bearings good. So I taken off and went some 2 miles that's wide open. And I thought I'd lost the car. And so she was gasping for breath. And so I stopped and I was trying to help her. And of course, before I realized that the car was on to me again, and of course, and there was another burst of fire, and of course I was hit, which just ripped my jaw off here completely. It was hanging plumb down on my shoulder here. And of course she was hit again and killed. And of course I was just temporarily stunned.
Well, Buford, did you feel revenge, I mean, for those thugs, the people that done this?
That's what you can't keep from not having some sort of revenge, but yeah, I'd like to let, of course, the law handle it in their way if they can work it out. I mean, of course, it is something that, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It just hurts way down deep. When you've been hurt as bad as I have, and